and we'll begin. Dr. Dijkman, it's a pleasure to have you and see you again and speak with you. I wanted to let everybody, I wish we could have done this when it first came out, but you recently published an article in JAMA that is around assessment of silicone particle migration among women undergoing removal or revision of silicone breast implants in the Netherlands. And it was quite a remarkable study. And I have many questions, and I hope that the people watching, the practitioners and women that are interested in or have BII, take a listen to this, because for me, it just validates that there is a reason that our physiological issues are happening. And again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And let's dig in, shall we?
Yes, happy to meet you, and I'm very happy to discuss this topic with your board and the people. And
I would like to also offer up to the community, you presented in the summit last year on silicone particles. So soon Terry and I will announce we will have a YouTube channel for the Breast Implant Health Summit, and we'll begin to have Zoom calls to set the foundation for the next summit next year, right? So we'll use your presentation. We'll put it also with this presentation, and so people can learn more about silicone, right? And it hopefully will be, we'll also have the publications there for those who want to do the deep reading, but we'll set the stage, and thank you for that as well. Sorry.
And I thank you for creating awareness to do this all, and especially for you, Danielle and Terry, that what you do with the different topics and the different platforms. So I'm very happy with that, and only together we can create awareness.
Agreed. What made you do the study?
Now, every time there is discussion about the old implants, and they were fluid, of course, and that is also important in this article, that we wanted to create a sort of overview history in the introduction. So what was going on in 95, the studies of Broadbar, that he really showed that there was causality between the fluid silicone, and of course all the plastic surgeons know that the old implants bleed, and that there was a lot of migration and often rupture. But every time when we discussed, plastic surgeons said, yeah, but the newer, the cohesive implants, they don't bleed. So according to the plastic surgeons, they said they were safe. And every time mama pathologist Peter Bult and I, when we investigated a capsule from a patient, then we see gel bleed and a lot of migration outside the capsule. So there came a time that mama pathologist Peter Bult and I said, we have to investigate all the patients we have in the Radboud UMC, and we want, the most important topic is, are there differences between the old ones, the leaky and the real sick making implants, and the new cohesive implants? And so we have investigated that, and that is our study. And our findings are that the new cohesive implants act the same as the old ones. After day one, they bleed, and after some time, you will get migration into the body. And what we see is that all those patients have a chronic inflammatory reaction, and that is associated with histiocytes. It's really chronic inflammation. So it's associated with histiocytes, giant cells. So that's also very important for the oxidative stress, and a real chronic inflammation. So that we think is the most important thing, then also when you don't get ill, a chronic inflammatory reaction and a chronic inflammatory response in the body increasing because of the silicon migration, and that's also reported in other studies, but we can discuss that later. That is not healthy for none.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I believe you know Dr. Eduardo Flore, and with MRI, he can see the granulomas, which he's tested in silicone granulomas. So he came up with the term silicone-induced granulomas within the breast implant capsule. And that's the only measure I know that's non-invasive to be able to say there's an inflammatory process that these implants can cause.
Yes, of course. And granulomas, also for the listeners, a granuloma is a very specific chronic inflammatory reaction. It's a reaction of the body on an agent which they can't resolve. So that's the problem of a chronic inflammatory reaction. So what you see is that the body and the whole immune system is exhausted. So
yeah, it's almost like toxicity breeds the deficiency.
Exactly. So and what is a very, very important point is that rupture and granulomas you don't want to have. Then you are already a step too far. The poisoning of the body is then very heavy.
Yeah, it's already once you, sorry, go ahead, Terry.
No, and you don't even need to have the rupture to have the granulomas. It happens just through the gel bleed, right?
Yeah. That we also see is that in all our patients we see migration. So a lot of plastic surgeons said, okay, gel bleed, okay, that can happen, but it stays within the capsule, the silicon. But that's not true. The capsule is a sort of lasagna, and so you get migration of silicon after a few months already outside the capsule, and it moves into the body to everywhere. So that we have already showed in 2016 when silicon also can reach every spot in the body, spinal cord, brains, etc., etc.
And I would have, I mean, this is a big assumption, but in working with women, mainly the lymphatic system, well, silicone, I think it was, I'm going to say his name wrong, Dr. Perusian. I beat it up, but he and you shared, I think, in your presentation too, at the summit, that silicone is lipophilic, it loves fat. And the
yeah, but that's a very small problem. Then sometimes people call lipophilic the same as hydrophilic or hydrophobe. So hydrophobe, silicon is really hydrophobe, and so we call it also lipophilic. But very special is that you will not find it in the fat of the breast.
No, but you find it in the lymph.
Yes, there you find it.
And that is very fat rich. Yeah.
Yes.
And the lymph goes everywhere. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that is also what we see when you do an echo. So on lymph nodes, with echo, you see a snowstorm image. And that's very typical for silicon. So, but when you have already silicon in your lymph nodes, then you have a problem.
Yep.
Then, in my opinion, then you are already a little bit too late.
Yeah, and way behind the scenes, we're looking at ways to bend, bind, oxidize, change the state of silicones so we can carry it out. And I'm digressing here, but I have to because you're here and this is my favorite topic as far as lymph and getting the silicone out. Like the paper you did with Dr. Capel on the autopsy, and you look where it is, I think one of the main places where it was in the gut as well. So at least we know it moves, right? And
Moves
And
everywhere.
and that is, if it moves, if we can move it, we can also get rid of at least some of it, right? I mean,
Yes, I
we're
agree.
hypothetically speaking, but like I
Yeah.
can do an ultrasound, do whether it's lymph drainage or visceral, or take lymphatic enzymes, or do the things, and or even sauna post explant, please, right? And I can see the snowstorm change and sometimes move from the armpits. That doesn't mean it doesn't come back, but it at least moves. So that gives me hope.
Yeah, that's true. And I also knew patients who are sick for 4 years, and they continuously used strong detox and all those system works, and then at the end they really recovered. So there is hope for
That's me.
also very sick patients.
Yeah, yeah, it's promising. So thank you for allowing me to digress about the lymph and
But,
silicone.
but, but the lymph nodes can be a problem. And then I also knew patients, they don't recover. And then because some lymph nodes were fully loaded with silicon,
Yeah.
and then we extracted via surgery those lymph nodes, and then recovery took place within few months.
Question for
Oh.
you: how did you in this study you chose to look at the capsule and then outside the capsule? How did you sample, and then how did you choose to remove the lymph nodes? And bless those women who sacrificed the lymph nodes, because that's not a small, that's a big contribution to this.
Yeah, that's true. So, but we couldn't choose. All these materials were already within the database and within the laboratory. So, but these investigations and these findings are very important for the future. So now, then we had also only a small piece of capsule, and also often what is often said is, yeah, when the explantation takes place, why would we investigate the capsule? Then there is no problem at all. So, but then we have also not the information of those patients. So now, the last year, the group of patients who really ordered to investigate their capsules during removal, during explantation, and now we look at those capsules, and this group is really increasing now. So that is our future cohort. And what we see there is also patients with no complaints or very mild complaints, but they have the implants for a few years. Then we see already a lot of gel bleed and a lot of migration outside the capsule. And also, of course, patients with rupture, then the migration, the load of silicon increases dramatically.
Yeah.
So at this point now, we have already seen so much patients also beside the database in this article, that we know for sure that all silicon breast implants bleed from day one, and that after several months already migration takes place.
Yeah.
And this increases in time.
And so in the summary of safety effectiveness data sheets that the companies provide the FDA, they show that there's a bleed. They show that there's a I'm just going to call it bleed, because I'm blanking on the if they call it permeability or what they call it in the SSED right now. And they deduct in this, and most of these came from their initial PMAs for each of the manufacturers. So I think 86 or 92, something around those timeframes. And they say that it does bleed, and then at 3 months, it decreases its bleeding. So they acknowledge that this happens. And at that time, I think they believe that silicone is inert, but they don't, there's a difference, there's a distinction that I think we'll be making over the next few years between inert and inactive or active. And then there's a distinction of what you began with, and then the oxidation or the bonding or the cross-linking or the different powers that now these molecules have. And I'm going to digress just to, just to data dump.
Yeah, but this is indeed a very interesting topic. Then we have two things. First, we see bleed, and this increases in time, and rupture increases in time. Why? Because silicone breast implants biodegrade in the body. So everything is degraded in the body. And so, and that's very important. Then normal silicone or PDMS that are very long chain and very stable, but via biodegradation, you get very small parts. So you get degraded molecules, and so you get very small molecules. And these small molecules, they are much reactivity and very reactive with the tissue, and so also more toxic. So biodegradation is a very important topic. And of course, silicone is not inert at all. Then a chronic inflammatory reaction is not normal. It's a defense of the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Oh, so much more to say. You know, and those small, so I will say it, because if anyone's watching, like, this is where we need the research. This is where we need help. I need help. When you look at the periodic table and you look at where carbon is, and we're carbon beings, we need carbon for energy, for function, for all of that. Right underneath carbon is silicone. And so what I would love to learn more about is, I know that silicone can replace carbon. And if we're depleted in different things, we're not as carbon rich, right? And so silicone then binds to these sites, and it's I'm trying to think of an analogy, but the ones that are coming probably I shouldn't say.
But also this, I think we can talk a lot more about this, but it's very interesting. Then in the body, silicon acts like carbon, but it can also bind to metallics. So it's very reactive. The reactivity is very high.
Well, and so I think that's why they use the platinum cross-linking, right? Yeah. Because it could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and for that, of course, you need platinum to create cohesive gel. Otherwise, you can't make cohesive gel.
Is there? Do you know? Is there platinum in the shell?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we totally digressed, and all of this is good stuff, though. But we need.
But a very important point is that a lot of plastic surgeons and they criticize this article because of the bias in the patient group. And I have already said the most important message is cohesive gel reacts the same as the non-cohesive. But also in this group, although this group is not so big, but these are not only patients with rupture. Here in this group, there are also patients who had the silicone breast implants only for a few years and not so much complaints.
Yeah, so, well, it begs for a multi-center study as well. And if you look at the retrospective data from Dr. Buenswick, aka Dr. B, he looked at silicone, and then he looked at saline smooth, and he found silicone in the ruptured population as well as the unruptured. But what was real intriguing to me is that the silicone was also found in the capsule of the saline implants, right? So there's multiple conversations we need to dig into, and the shell is the shell is the culprit right now for me until proven otherwise. And then
that I totally agree. Then the shell is very important, and especially when you talk textured implants. I have already shown under the microscope that texture is also very easily biodegraded, and all that texture comes loose and will create the same migration problems. So that article about the surface topography, that's the article of Doloff and a group of Langer, that's also very, very interesting, because people, I think, get complaints because of the texture and the surface of the implant and the silicon migration.
Like, and I think the cascade, because of the texture, is different, right? Like, I think, and this is, people listening, this is just hypothetical until we can prove it. But when you look at what, first the implant has to be in, and right now we're only talking breast implants. This may or may not happen with other foreign objects in the body, and there's other evidence based on this too, so we could broaden the scope. But for breast implants, it's a foreign object in the body. Your body does what it does. Then you have gel bleed. Then you have chronic inflammation. And ideally, right now, the only thing I know, you know, like there are companies out there working on different things to test to see if the implant materials are in the body. And right now, what's available to date is the MRI to look for silicone-induced granulomas, right? So we know that something of this implant is impacting the body, and we're just looking at the breast implant and the breast implant capsule. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
But when we start to put these pictures together and we see the impact on the body, it really begs us to start breaking apart the interfacing of each thing, right? And it brings us back to the implant. And in my mind, and we'll bring it back to the article, like I never knew that the implant could bleed, right? I never knew that the shell could degrade. And I never knew, you know, what's the difference between that and rupture, right? And we're seeing...
And very simple, how can you explain that when I take a new implant from the shelf and I run over it with a car, nothing happens, okay? And then you put it in the body, and sometimes after 4 years already we have a rupture. Or like the FDA says, in 31% of the cases we get a rupture between 5 and 50 years. How is that possible? Very easily, via biodegradation.
Well, and you see, so then you look at some of the articles of the different things that can grow either from the implant into the tissue, or when we look at the number of cancers that occur within the breast implant capsule and the breast implant, and how it then migrates into the actual implant, right? So there's gaps, there's ways of things to travel in and travel out. And when you look at some of these explants and you see the discoloration, or you see the specks in there, how?
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
And
it's in and out.
And they don't call that a rupture, right? But how did that change color? How did you get the black specks in there? How did, you know, how we learned with another Dr. B that they overfill the saline just because they know some is going to come out. And maybe that's the valve with saline. Like, we should be looking at all of this. And what I really love is that you made it so possible with this paper for us, the women and practitioners, to be able to ask for pathology for refractile properties that resemble silicone. Can you mention a little bit about that? Like, because 4 years ago when I was looking at it, they're like, oh, you have to do it with toxicology. But no, pathologists can easily read this.
Yeah, very easily, but you need some knowledge about it. Then what we often see in when we get a second opinion request, that a pathologist said, yeah, there are some pages, but no migration of silicon. And then we look at the capsule, and then we directly see a lot of gel bleed and a lot of migration. So that is, it's simple, but you need some knowledge.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Well, you have
don't
to ask
see.
for the right procedure
Exactly.
then.
Exactly.
Maybe
So
we can
that's
maybe we can get you or Dr. Bolt to at the summit in 22. Maybe we can show how one can easily learn to read.
Yeah, but
silicone.
when you look at the figure or the pictures in my publications,
Oh, let me call.
that
I can
it's
call that
already
up.
very simple to see.
Let me see if I can call that up. Bear with me here. And let me. Am I sharing?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Sorry, people. There we go. How can you see? I'm gonna go to oops.
Yep, this is the main one.
I was prepared
Oh, great.
ish. It's hard to see the bottom, but let me see if I need to scroll down.
Yeah, but what you here see is at the left, you see a lot of vacuoles, and all those vacuoles, they are filled with silicon. And what you see is, of course, when you have a very critical look under the microscope, you see that there is a sort of pattern. So you see a few gray stripes. So then you know already that's it's silicon. But in picture D, there we have very specifically stained it with the Moro staining, and that's a modified oil red staining. And then everything what is silicon becomes red. So here you see
Oh, wow.
how much silicon is bleeding and migrating outside the capsule into the body.
Wow.
And then another discussion, but that's a little bit too much, is a new publication is coming, and there we show that when you have Baker 1, so very thin capsules, there is not so much silicon in it, but it moves directly through it into the body. And when you look at thicker capsules, then you see a lot of accumulation of silicon in that. So now the next topic is explantation. So it's very, very, very important. When you want to recover, the capsules have to be removed, especially the thicker ones. Then they are loaded with silicon and a lot of chronic inflammatory reactions. And some plastic surgeons say, oh, capsules, they will resolve. They will never resolve.
It will not resolve.
Never.
No.
They will not.
So,
and I will even push it that if it's I'll just share my experience with myself before making assumptions, right? I did not have maybe I was Baker 1, maybe, I don't even know that it was a 2. And then I developed a seroma. So I had an inflammatory process after my explant. And, I think what can occur is that you have silicone past the capsule in the breast tissue, in the lymph. And then I had additional inflammation. I mean, surgery is inflammation. And I developed a bursa. So I developed a appropriate capsule around the seroma. And after 3 years, we noticed it was there. And then we removed that. And my health went straight up better. Yeah, exactly. Because it took out more of that inflammatory cascade, if you will, right? So I actually had a silicone-induced granuloma in my seroma, right? So not that we want to, I think it would be a great day if we could, while we're in the surgery, test for silicone so we know how much tissue we need to remove. Because for some of us, we're going to move that silicone through the body and deposit it somewhere, and hopefully it's excreted, right? But that's a cascade of potential problem to have that silicone in the body. And we don't know what that means for us. And we do know that there's plenty of data out there that full explant with capsulectomy yields symptomatic high relief of symptomatic issues, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah, right. And that's also extra proof that silicon is not inert. And the second step is then every time I have discussion about causation, then they say, yeah, this is all circumstantial evidence and blah, 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 blah. But of course, when you put something in and you get ill and you get something out via explantation and you recover, then I think, okay, it's indirect proof, but it's really proof for causation.
yeah, what I think this study, and I hope others will do this. I know that there's a couple of studies going on right now that took samples of the capsule, right? And so I hope I would assume they would save the capsule so we could retrospectively go back like Dr. B did and use some of this staining to look for, with a trained eye, the silicone, right? Because I don't know that we knew we could look like this before. And so now we have a lot more information, and it doesn't have to be toxicology in the capsule. It can simply be a pathological pathology report. And so any study coming out, I think, I think they should have to do this. And I wouldn't think that this would be too costly to add this on for a study. You're already looking at it. And for women going for explant now, ask for this, take this article and say, I would like to make sure the pathology or the pathologist can do this type of review on my capsule. It just, do you need to know to heal? No, right? Removal is key. But I know for me, I wanted to know, and I didn't know how to ask. So this is brilliant.
It's also for your insurance, I think, later. Then, of course, that is also important. Who pays? Who pays for the explantation? Who pays when you get ill?
Yeah. And so we have process for data collection, and I think this is going to make a marked difference in research studies moving forward. And I hope to see more about all of this as well. I totally haven't looked at the Facebook Live to see if there's any questions. And Terry, I want to know if you have questions. I
just got so involved in the conversation that I wasn't looking.
I took up all of Dr. Dijkman's time. And I still, someday I will get your name sounding correctly. I know how to spell it. Let's take a quick look to see if people have questions. We did post the article. We can always take the questions and comments over the next couple of days and then report back.
Yes, exactly. So no problem at all.
Do you want me to ask one of the questions?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the problem with pathology processing? Need trusted, verifiable laboratory? Is that the problem with pathology processing? That's the question.
Now, what I know is that a lot of plastic surgeons, when you ask the plastic surgeon, please investigate my capsule, then they say it isn't important. So,
well, I'll be honest, my surgeon actually said that she looked at it with her visually to see if there was any issues. I did have abnormal cells, so she did remove the abnormal cells, but I've heard from other, not just my plastic surgeon, but other plastic surgeons that say the same thing, that they visually look at the capsule to see if it's healthy or not. But you can't visually see
impossible.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you see really big knots on it, and then of course there is something wrong. Then that is already a sign for problems, more proliferation, etc., etc. But under the microscope, you only see what's really going on, and if there is a real load of silicon and how much histiocytes or giant cells there are and how much migration outside the capsule there is.
Yeah, or even the distinction of biofilm and
but you need pathological investigation. So then you are sure what's going on there. And then you know also, and I'm convinced of that, when all capsules would be investigated, then the conclusion would be all silicone implants bleed and every capsule contains silicone, and we see a lot of chronic inflammatory response.
Yeah, and
That's
I'll
not
arm wrestle
healthy.
you that we'll see it with saline as well. I think.
Yeah, that's possible, but as a chronic inflammatory response increases via silicon migration and extra texture.
Yep.
So you see it also in a saline with
I have saline.
with smooth or textured,
Right, smooth, yeah.
but when you have a silicon breast implant, then it increases extra.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I can, you know, in my small practice, I can say that I see more cohesive gel with women, mostly with implants, and they report they want help at 3 months, at, you know, a year, 2 years, versus those who have saline. They're coming to see me about, is it my breast implants, around, I think 6 years is the earliest, and then almost 10, 11 years with saline, right?
Yeah.
So low
It's
grade
slower. Yeah.
over time. So it's a different manifestation of symptoms, but they all are the same vague like symptoms. They're just of different morphologies, if you will.
Yes.
So, whew,
Yeah, that's true.
this is good stuff. And then also, like, if for that question, right now we're only just talking about silicone, but if you have textured implants, those have to be read by a pathologist. You want to be sure. There's so many different steps to take. There are guidelines to take for BIA-LCL. We're not necessarily covering that here, but know that if you have textured, or you think you have textured, though, that you should follow certain criteria. Even if at Explant it looks good and you look fine, get it tested, because the watch for 5 years plus after that is important for you.
I totally agree. Especially that point we have discussed in our discussions about the article in Poland. Surgeons in Poland, they found ALCL in the lymph nodes 2 years after explantation. So there you see that rupture and migration is a problem, a risk.
Yeah. And hopefully in not so long time, hopefully within the year, we can talk more about, like Dr. Turner talked, and a few others. I think Tanya Dempsey talked in the summit about T-cell and how they split, and how it's really there to support us, and what happens there, and then how the cascade of events turns, you know, either ALCL or BII and things like that. So
I think also the most important thing is plastic surgeons, doctors, we researchers, we are not each other's enemies. We have to work together, we have to cooperate, and we have to discuss this and try to create awareness. And of course, the most important thing is the patient.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Terry, are there any other questions?
Let me look real quick. I think it's in French. Do you do TEP, IRM cerebral? What is I don't know what that is. TEP, IRM?
No, I don't.
No.
I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
We'll get Julie Elliott to translate for us.
I know.
Yeah, and then maybe we can create another session about all the questions or discussions or whatever.
Oh, if you're willing, absolutely.
Of course. We need each other.
Okay, great. But for today, we'll say thank you for taking precious time away from your Sunday, for you evening, for everyone watching. Thanks for being with us. Terry and Henry, if you'd stay on, we'll end the Facebook Live, and people, let us know your questions and other topics you would like us to share on.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Henry.
Okay, now I'm going to stop recording, but